I always thought my life with Clara was a quiet masterpiece, a canvas painted with steady strokes of trust and routine. We'd been married 12 years, living in a modest house on the edge of town, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. I'm Daniel, a man of simple pleasures, coffee in the morning, a good book at night, and Clara's laughter filling the gaps. She was a librarian, her days spent among dusty shelves, her auburn hair catching the light like a flame. I worked as a carpenter, shaping wood into things that lasted, things people could rely on. We weren't flashy, but we were solid. Or so I believed. It started with a crack in the routine, subtle as a splinter under a fingernail. Clara began staying late at the library, claiming they were digitizing old records. "It's tedious," she'd say, her hazel eyes flickering away from mine as she stirred her tea. I didn't question it. Why would I? She'd always been diligent, her love for books a thread woven into our marriage. But then the late nights stretched into weekends, and her excuses grew thinner, like paper worn from too many hands. I'd wait up, the clock ticking past midnight, the house silent except for the creak of my chair. One evening, I decided to surprise her. I'd finished a cherrywood table for a client and thought I'd bring her dinner, lasagna, her favorite. The library was a squat brick building, its windows glowing faintly against the dusk. I parked across the street, thermos in hand, and that's when I saw it. Clara stepping out, not alone, but with him. Richard Grayson, the town's golden boy, tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that could sell you anything. He owned the hardware store where I bought my nails and varnish. They weren't just colleagues. Their hands brushed as they walked, her laugh ringing out in a way I hadn't heard in months. I sat there, the lasagna cooling in my lap, watching them climb into his truck. My chest tightened, a vice of disbelief and rage. She'd lied. Not about work, but about us. I drove home, the thermos untouched, my mind a storm of jagged edges. I didn't confront her that night. She slipped in at 2 a.m., smelling of lavender and something sharper. His cologne, I realized later. She kissed my forehead, thinking I was asleep, and I lay there, plotting the unraveling of everything. The next morning, I played the part of the oblivious husband. Clara hummed over her coffee, her hair tied back, oblivious to the fracture she'd caused. "Busy day ahead?" I asked, my voice steady as I sliced an apple. She nodded, mentioning a meeting with the library board. I smiled, nodding back, while my mind churned. Richard Grayson. I knew him well enough. His store was a hub for every tradesman in town. He'd always been friendly, asking about Clara with a glint in his eye I'd mistaken for politeness. Now it mocked me. I went to work, but my hands trembled as I sanded a plank. The betrayal wasn't just hers, it was his, too. A man I'd shaken hands with, laughed with over beers at the summer fair. I needed proof, something tangible to hold against the doubt gnawing at me. That afternoon, I drove to the library, parking out of sight. She wasn't there. The clerk said she'd left early for personal business. My gut twisted. I tailed her usual route, spotting her car at a diner on the highway, a place we'd never gone together. Through the window, I saw them. Clara and Richard, heads bent close, her fingers tracing his wrist. I didn't storm in. Instead, I waited, watching as they left, her arm looped through his. They drove to a motel, a rundown place with peeling paint and flickering neon. I followed, parking far enough to stay unseen. The blinds of room 12 twitched, and I knew. My phone buzzed, Clara texting she'd be late again. I stared at the screen, the lie glowing back at me. That's when the idea took root. Not just confrontation, but something colder, sharper. Back home, I dug through our life. Her laptop was password protected, but I knew her habits. She used the same code for everything. Our anniversary, 0612. It opened like a confession. Emails, photos, messages, months of them, detailing stolen moments with Richard. One photo showed them by a lake, her head on his chest, captioned, "Our secret." My hands shook as I printed it, the ink staining my fingers like blood. Revenge wasn't enough. I wanted ruin. Days passed and I wore my mask well. Clara noticed nothing, her guilt buried under smiles and small talk. I watched her every move, cataloging her lies. She'd taken to wearing a new scarf, silk and crimson, a gift from him, I guessed. It draped her neck like a noose she didn't see. I needed more than evidence, I needed leverage, a way to dismantle them both. Richard's store was my next stop. I walked in, the bell jangling, and he greeted me with that easy grin. "Hey Dan, need more oak?" I nodded, buying time, scanning the place. His office door was ajar, a glimpse of papers and a safe. That night I broke in. It wasn't hard, small towns breed trust, and his lock was cheap. The safe took longer, but I'd learned tricks from a locksmith friend years back. Inside I found cash, receipts, and a ledger. Richard wasn't just selling hammers, he was skimming taxes, hiding profits in a shell company. It was sloppy, arrogant, and perfect. I photographed it all, my breath shallow in the dark. Clara's betrayal had opened this door, but Richard's greed would widen it. At home, I pieced it together. She thought she'd hidden her tracks, but her emails hinted at plans. Weekends away, a future without me. Richard's money fueled it, his confidence blinding him to consequences. I didn't sleep that night, my mind a forge, hammering out a plan. Confrontation was too simple. I wanted them to feel the weight of their choices, to choke on it. I started small, planting seeds. I called the tax office anonymously, tipping them off about Grayson Hardware. Let them dig while I worked closer to home. Clara's next late night I followed again. They met at the motel, predictable as moths to flame. I waited until they were inside, then slashed his tires, just enough to strand them. Petty, yes, but it was a taste of the chaos coming. I drove home, her scarf in my pocket, its silk cool against my skin. It would be my first weapon. The tax investigation hit Richard fast. I heard it through the grapevine, whispers at the diner, mutters in the lumberyard. "Grayson's in deep," they said, and I smiled into my coffee. Clara came home rattled, her fingers twisting that scarf. "Richard's stressed," she murmured, thinking I'd buy it as concern for a friend. I nodded, feigning sympathy, while my plan grew roots. She didn't know I'd seen the motel receipts she'd tossed, crumpled in her purse like dirty secrets. I escalated. Using a burner phone, I texted Richard from Clara, luring him to a bar across town. He went, eager as a dog, while I kept her busy with a fabricated plumbing emergency at home. She fussed over the sink, oblivious, as he waited alone, confused. I watched from afar, his frustration mounting as he called her phone. Silent in my pocket. It was small, but it sowed doubt. I wanted cracks in their trust, fissures to widen later. Next, I turned to her world. The library board loved Clara, but they didn't know her like I did. I mailed them an anonymous letter, typed on a library typewriter I'd borrowed, hinting at misconduct with a local businessman. No names, just enough to stir whispers. She came home pale one day, saying they'd questioned her about rumors. I hugged her, my arms a cage, and said, "People are cruel." Inside I burned. Richard's store faltered as the tax probe deepened. He called her more, their voices sharp through the walls when she thought I slept. I recorded it, their panic a symphony. The scarf became my talisman. I'd unravel her with it, thread by thread. Revenge wasn't loud yet. It was a whisper, building to a scream. A month in, their world teetered. Richard's store lost customers, his charm tarnished by audits. Clara's library job hung by a thread, the board's trust fraying. I watched her unravel, her laughter replaced by sighs, her eyes darting when I entered a room. She still didn't suspect me, her guilt blinding her to my hand in the chaos. I fed it, subtle as poison. I accidentally left a bank statement out, one I'd doctored to show withdrawals she couldn't explain. Money I'd funneled to a fake account, hinting at her own deceit. She confronted me, voice trembling. "Daniel, did you take money out?" I played dumb, hurt, letting her squirm. "No." "Clara, what's going on?" She backpedaled, blaming a glitch, but the seed was planted. I was the victim now, she the liar. Richard felt it too. I'd mailed him a photo from her laptop, their lake moment with no note. Let him wonder who knew, who watched. One night, she broke. I found her crying, scarf clutched like a lifeline. "I've messed up," she sobbed, but stopped short of confession. I held her, my touch a lie, and whispered, "We'll fix it." She didn't know I'd already fixed it. Fixed them. The tax office raided his store that week, seizing records. He called her, frantic, and I listened through the vent, their desperation a balm to my rage. I upped the ante. Using his ledger, I tipped off a supplier he'd stiffed. They sued, his debts piling like bricks. Clara's phone buzzed constantly, her nerves fraying. I suggested a weekend away, to reconnect, and she agreed, guilt driving her. We went, but I'd already mailed the board more photos this time, blurred but damning. Monday, she'd returned to whispers. Richard, to ruin. My revenge was a machine now, gears grinding, unstoppable. The weekend away was a charade, a stage I'd built to watch Clara perform. We drove to a cabin by Lake Huron, a place we'd once loved, its pine walls now a backdrop for my quiet fury. She tried to play the wife, cooking breakfast, her hands trembling as she cracked eggs, her smiles brittle as glass. I mirrored her, all warmth and concern, while my mind spun the next thread of their undoing. She didn't know Richard's world was crumbling faster than she could imagine. Back home, the supplier's lawsuit had hit the papers. Local businessman faces financial ruin. The headline crowed, and I left it on the counter, open to that page. Clara's eyes skimmed it over coffee, her mug pausing midair. "Poor Richard," she muttered, and I nodded, biting back the venom. Poor Richard indeed. I'd called his landlord too. Another anonymous tip about unpaid rent, nudging the eviction notice closer. His store was a house of cards, and I was the wind. She kept her phone close, its screen lighting up with his name when she thought I wasn't looking. I'd already cloned it, simple software from a shady site, installed while she slept. Every message, every call streamed to me. "I need you," he'd typed that morning, and she'd replied, "Soon." Soon wouldn't come. I intercepted her next plan, a rendezvous at the motel, by forgetting my wallet at home, forcing her to drive me back. She fumed silently, her knuckles white on the wheel, while I hummed, innocent as a child. That night I struck deeper. Using her cloned phone, I sent Richard a message from her. "It's over. I can't do this anymore." He called instantly, but I'd silenced her line. She slept beside me, oblivious, as his voicemails piled up, angry, then pleading, then broken. I listened, each word a brick in the wall I was building between them. By morning, she'd find his silence, her confusion my reward. The scarf, that crimson thread, stayed in my drawer, waiting. Clara woke to a quiet phone, her brow furrowing as she checked it. "Strange," she murmured, and I shrugged, flipping pancakes like nothing was wrong. Inside, I gloated. Richard's desperation was a silent scream she couldn't hear. She left for the library, scarf trailing like a banner, and I followed later, parking out of sight. The board had acted on my photos. Whispers greeted her, heads turning as she walked in. She emerged an hour later, pale, clutching her bag like a shield. She didn't tell me they'd suspended her, but I knew. A friend on the board owed me a favor years back. I'd built his deck for free. He'd called, voice low, saying, "She's on thin ice, Dan. Those pictures?" I thanked him, feigning shock, while my plan tightened. At home, she paced, muttering about misunderstandings, her fingers twisting that scarf until it frayed. I offered tea, my kindness ablaze, and she drank, unaware I'd slipped a mild sedative in. Nothing dangerous, just enough to dull her edge. While she dozed, I raided Richard's life again. His eviction was public now, the store padlocked. I drove by, the closed sign a trophy, then mailed his creditors more from his ledger, copies I'd kept, sent from a post office 2 towns over. They'd swarm him like flies. Back home, I planted a letter in her purse, forged in her handwriting. "Richard," I told Daniel everything. "I'm sorry." She'd find it eventually, panic setting in. I wanted her to feel hunted, trapped by her own lies. That evening, She woke groggy, scarf askew. I feel off, she said, and I rubbed her shoulders, whispering, stress maybe. She nodded, trusting me still, while I smiled into her hair. Richard called again. I let it ring once before disconnecting her line remotely. Their bridge was burning and I held the torch. The cracks widened. Clara's suspension became a leave of absence. The library board citing conduct unbecoming. She told me over dinner, her voice small, blaming rumors and jealous coworkers. I listened, fork scraping my plate, and asked, what kind of rumors? She froze, then waved it off, silly things. But her eyes betrayed her. She knew something was unraveling, just not how deep my hands were in the threads. Richard's ruin accelerated. The creditors descended, his truck repossessed, his apartment lease canceled. I watched from a distance as he loaded boxes into a borrowed van. His shoulders slumped. I tipped a local gossip too, a woman with a blog and no scruples, suggesting financial troubles tied to personal scandals. She ran with it, naming Clara in vague terms, a librarian with secrets. The town buzzed, and Clara's phone stayed dark, her lifeline to him severed by my tech tricks. She found the forged letter that night, buried in her purse. Daniel, she gasped, holding it up, her face ashen. What is this? I widened my eyes, all innocence. I don't know, Clara. Did you write it? She stammered, denying it, but doubt gnawed at her. Someone's messing with me, she whispered, and I hugged her, my grip a promise of worse to come. She didn't suspect me yet, but the fear was delicious. I pushed further. Using Richard's cloned email, I sent Clara a message from him. You told him? We're done. She read it at midnight, thinking I slept, her sob muffled by her pillow. I lay still, triumphant, as her world shrank. The scarf, now tattered, hung on her chair, a relic of her betrayal, soon her noose. Clara broke the next day. She cornered me in the kitchen, eyes wild, scarf clutched like a talisman. Richard's gone, she said, voice cracking. His store, his place, everything. And this? She thrust her phone at me, the email glaring. He thinks I told you something. I didn't, Daniel, I swear. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Told me what? Her mouth opened, then shut, trapped by her own half-truths. I let the silence stretch, her panic a melody. She didn't know I'd orchestrated his vanishing act. After the eviction, I'd paid a drifter, cash, no questions, to rough up Richard's van, make it look like he'd fled in shame. The town assumed he'd skipped out, debts unpaid, leaving Clara to face the fallout alone. She tried calling him, but I'd rerouted his number to a dead line. He's ghosting me, she whispered, and I nodded, all sympathy, while my heart sang. The library fired her that afternoon. A formal letter arrived, citing moral concerns. And she read it aloud, trembling. They think I'm involved in his mess, she said, tears streaking her face. I held her, my touch a lie, and murmured, we'll get through this. She clung to me, blind to the architect of her ruin. That night, I burned the scarf in the backyard, its silk curling into ash, a quiet vow sealed. Richard surfaced online, a desperate post on a local forum begging for work. I replied anonymously, offering a job 2 states away. Fake, of course, but enough to lure him further from her. He'd chase it, lost and broke, while I tightened the screws here. Clara's isolation was nearly complete, her allies gone, her lies exposed. A week later, Clara was a shadow. She barely ate, her hair unwashed, her days spent staring out windows. The town shunned her. Gossip had painted her as Richard's accomplice, a woman who'd traded virtue for scandal. I fed the fire, dropping hints at the lumberyard. She's not herself lately. They nodded, assuming guilt, while I stacked the deck. She found a note I'd planted in her coat. Meet me, R, and drove to the motel, frantic. I'd staged it, empty, letting her wait in the cold. Richard called once, from a payphone, his voice hoarse on her voicemail. Clara, where are you? I deleted it before she heard, replacing it with a text from him. You ruined me. Goodbye. She read it at dawn, collapsing, and I watched, silent, as she begged the air for answers. His trail went cold. He'd taken my bait, chasing nothing, his life a wreck. I turned inward. Our savings disappeared, transferred to an account she'd never find, her name forged on the papers. She noticed, accusing me of betrayal, and I wept, convincing her it was hackers. She believed me, clinging to the last thread of us, while I prepared the final blow. Her world was ash, and I'd light the match to finish it. Clara's collapse was a quiet thing, a house of cards folding in slow motion. She stopped leaving the house, her days spent in a haze of regret and confusion. The town had turned its back. Neighbors avoided her, old friends stopped calling. I'd made sure of it, whispering just enough at the right ears. She's mixed up in something shady. They didn't need proof. Her absence from the library and Richard's downfall were evidence enough. She'd stare at me sometimes, searching for the husband she thought she knew. But I'd smile, steady as ever, my mask flawless. Our stolen savings gnawed at her. She'd call the bank daily, voice fraying as they repeated, "No trace, ma'am." I'd forged her signature too well, the money tucked into an offshore account under a name she'd never guess. Richard's middle name? A bitter irony. I let her think it was her fault, planting receipts for things she'd never bought. Jewelry, trips, hinting she'd been reckless. "I don't remember," she'd whisper, and I'd pat her hand, saying, "Maybe you were stressed." Her doubt grew, a weed choking her sanity. Richard was a ghost now, chasing my fake job lead in Ohio. I tracked him through a burner email he'd used to beg for updates. None came, of course. I sent him one last message from Clara. "You're nothing to me." He stopped writing after that, his silence a victory. But I wasn't done. I mailed Clara a package, disguised as from him, a cheap necklace and a note. For the memories. She opened it, trembling, and I watched her crumble, believing he'd moved on. The necklace was mine, bought with her lost money, a taunt she'd never unravel. That night I cooked her favorite meal, lasagna, and laced it with a sleep aid, stronger this time. She ate, trusting me still, and drifted off. I needed her pliable for the endgame. The house was quiet, the air thick with my intent. Revenge wasn't just about breaking them, it was about building something new from their ruins. Clara's mind began to slip, a threadbare tapestry unraveling. She'd wake from her drugged sleep disoriented, muttering about dreams where Richard accused her, where I turned away. I fed it subtle as a breeze. "You were talking in your sleep," I'd say casual. "Something about a lake?" Her eyes would widen, fear flickering, and she'd retreat into silence. The necklace sat on her dresser, a constant jab, its chain tangled like her thoughts. I staged the next blow. Using her cloned phone, I texted her from Richard. "I know what you did to us." She read it alone, late, and I heard her gasp through the wall. She called his dead number, sobbing into the void, while I adjusted the thermostat, cold, to match her isolation. She confronted me the next morning, voice raw. "He's back, Daniel. He hates me." I frowned, all concern. "Who, Clara?" She faltered, unable to say his name, and I let her stew in the ambiguity. The town's scorn sharpened. I'd leaked a rumor through the gossip blog. Clara had fled with Richard's money, only to return alone. It stuck, her reputation tarred beyond repair. She found graffiti on our mailbox, "Thief," and wept, begging me to move. "We can't," I said, citing the lost savings, my tone heavy with blame. She shrank further, a husk of the woman I'd married. Her trust in me the last tether I'd soon snap. I visited Richard's old store, now a shell, and left a note under the door. Her handwriting, forged. "I'm sorry I ruined you." If he ever returned, he'd find it, a final twist of the knife. Back home, I burned our wedding album page by page in the fireplace. Clara smelled the smoke, asked what it was. "Old papers," I lied, and she nodded, too broken to question. Clara's unraveling quickened. She'd sit for hours, staring at the necklace, whispering to herself. I'd catch fragments. Why me? And offer tea, my kindness a shroud. The sleep aids continued, small doses in her food, blurring her days into nights. She'd forget conversations, lose track of time, and I'd sigh, "You're not well, Clara." She'd nod, dependent now, her world shrinking to me. The man dismantling her piece by piece. I escalated the illusion. I hired a voice actor online, a cheap gig, to call her as Richard. He ranted, slurring like a broken man. "You took everything." She answered, pale, and I watched from the hall as she pleaded into static. He hung up, per my script. She dropped the phone, shaking, and I swooped in, all comfort. "Who was that?" I asked, knowing. "A mistake," she lied, and I smiled, her fear a mirror to my triumph. The bank sent a letter. Foreclosure loomed, our mortgage unpaid thanks to my rerouted funds. She read it, hands trembling, and begged me to fix it. "I'll try," I said, but did nothing. The house, our last anchor, slipped away, and I blamed her silently, letting her guilt fester. Neighbors stared as the sign went up, "For sale," and she hid inside, curtains drawn, a prisoner of my design. Richard's fate sealed itself. A news blip online. Man found destitute, identity unclear. I knew it was him. My lure had stranded him, penniless, in a nowhere town. I printed it, left it where she'd see, and watched her read, her breath hitching. "He's gone," she whispered, and I nodded solemn, while my heart roared. The end neared, a storm I'd brewed to perfection. Clara barely spoke now, her eyes hollow, her hands clutching that necklace like a lifeline. The house was under contract, sold to a stranger I'd insured would evict us fast. I packed, slow and deliberate, leaving her things in disarray, a message she couldn't miss. "Where will we go?" she asked, voice thin. "Somewhere new," I said, vague, letting her dread fill the gaps. I staged the final act. A letter arrived, from Richard, typed and mailed from nowhere. "You destroyed me, but I forgive you. Goodbye." She read it, collapsing, and I held her, my embrace a cage. "He's letting go," I murmured, and she sobbed, believing it real. I'd hired a forger for that one, the paper crisp with her ruin. She didn't eat that day, her strength fading, my drugs and lies a slow poison. The eviction came swift. Movers arrived, indifferent, as I guided her out, her steps unsteady. I'd rented a dingy apartment across town, a place of peeling walls and dim light. She sat there, lost, as I unpacked only my things. Hers stayed boxed, a silent rejection. "We'll rebuild." I lied, and she nodded, too gone to argue. Richard's necklace dangled from her neck, its weight her last tether to him, my final taunt. That night, I left her alone, claiming a job errand. I drove to the lake from their photo, scattered ashes. Not hers, just symbolic. From a fire pit, a ritual of closure. She'd never know, but I did, and it was enough. Her betrayal had birthed this, and I'd buried them both in its ashes. Clara's end was quiet, a shadow fading. The apartment became her cell, its walls closing in as she withered. I stopped the drugs. She didn't notice, her mind too frayed to care. She'd sit by the window, necklace in hand, murmuring apologies to no one. I fed her scraps of hope. "Things will get better," then snatched them away with silence. She stopped asking about money, the house, me. I was her jailer, her lifeline, her ghost. Richard's fate I learned later. He'd vanished into the underbelly of some city, a broken man, my work complete. Clara never knew. Her world reduced to that room, that necklace, my voice. One day she didn't wake. The doctor called it exhaustion. A kind lie. I buried her in a plain plot, no stone, the necklace with her. A final, cruel keepsake. I sold The Last of Us, moved far. A new name, a new life. The town forgot their scandal old news. I kept one photo, her at the lake, smiling with him. Tucked in a drawer, a trophy of my vengeance. They'd betrayed me, and I'd unmade them, slow and sure. The quiet was mine again, earned in ashes.